Speak then, we pray, to that end, in Jesus' name. Amen. We mentioned this morning that we want to speak on this verse tonight. It's been prayed a number of our times of prayer in the last few weeks, and it's been upon our hearts and our minds. James 4 verse 14, whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapour that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. Someone has described life just like this. Spills, these come in our infancy. Drills, these come to us when we're in school and we have the days of homework and learning and education. Thrills, these come in our teenage days. Whenever we have our days as teenagers, of being a young adult, we love to seek after thrills. Bills, these come to us whenever we first get married and we get a shock. Ills, these come to us as time marches on and sickness becomes more prevalent. Pills, when continued sickness drives us to the chemist. And then wills, when we slip out into eternity and families argue over what's left of us. That's how someone has simply described the basic facts of life, or underlined the bare-bone facts of life. You know, the Bible has much to say about the days of our lives, or it has much to say to us about the reality and brevity of life. The Psalm 90 is a very pointed psalm in that wise, because the start of the psalm starts off with how God is everlasting. Psalm 90 verse 2, from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. And yet as you go down through the psalm then, it speaks to us of, yes, the eternity of God, but the brevity of man's days. Psalm 90 verses 9 and 10. All our days are passed away in thy wrath. We spend our years as a tale told. The days of our years are 80 years and 10. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labour and sorrow, for it's soon cut off, and we fly away. And you see very quickly the psalmist's view on life and his points in life that he makes is that really we can only expect of 70 years. And if God is good to us, then we may get 80. But whether it's 70, whether it's 80, at the maximum, it's soon cut off and we fly away. Psalm 90 verse 9, we spend our years like a tale that's told. You know what it's like. You hear a story and it's funny at the time and maybe it sticks in the mind a little bit, but it just drifts away from the mind just like that. And we spend our years, our life, just like that, just like a tale, just like a story that is told. That is how quickly, that is how hastily on our lives are progressing. And here in this little book of James, in this last section, James is really dealing us some home truths about life. Now it's very interesting because he's writing to Jewish converts who probably were not in Israel any longer. In chapter 1 verses 1 and 2, it seems that they were scattered throughout Israel, but then scattered beyond the regions of Israel as well. And these individuals and Jews, you know what it's like. Jews have that kind of a depiction for being very, very thrifty in business. And that's absolutely right. That's biblical. Because this is who James is writing to. And you read in chapter 5 of him writing to those who were high-minded, those who were setting their affections, their minds on riches. He is speaking very strongly about that kind of mindset. You see, there were lucrative businesses in the days of James. Businesses like ivory, dyes. You think, for example, of Lydia, the woman of Thyatira. What did she do? She was a seller of purple, an expensive purple dye. Cedar wood, pearls, gold. And it seems that these kind of people that James is writing to, they dealt in this kind of thing. Now, it's not wrong to work hard. It's not wrong to be industrious. And if you read through the book of Proverbs, you'll find that it is actually commended. Industry, and even seeking to make a profit, it's commended. There's nothing wrong with that per se. It actually encourages it. So James only has a certain time of mindset in mind here in verse 13 when he says, go to now listen to it, ye that say. Ye that say. In other words, he's saying, look, there's a certain type of individual that says. Now what do they say? Well, as you read on in verse 13, today, tomorrow, we'll go to such a city, continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. In other words, there were individuals, and it's as if they just have their whole lives mapped out for them before them. Oh, we know where we're going tomorrow. We know we're going to go to this particular place. We're going to buy, we're going to sell such and such a city, and we're going to even be there for a year. Oh, they seem to have it all mapped out. And yet after that in verse 14, that is why James says, for what is your life? What is your life? What are you living for? And he then proceeds to tell them that they were not even promised tomorrow, that for as verse 14, you know not what shall be on the morrow, because your life is a vapor that appears for just a little while and then vanishes away. You see what James is saying here? He's saying you have your whole life mapped out before your very mind's eye, and yet you're not even promised tomorrow. Because nobody has the promise of tomorrow. And my friend, whilst planning with God is not wrong, planning without God is most certainly wrong. When you have that kind of a mindset, and maybe you're here tonight and you're outside of Christ, and you have years, you have decades, and it's all written down, it's all noted, there it is in your mind. When you have that kind of a life, my friend, that is wrong. Why? Because of what verse 14 says. We don't know what's on the morrow. None of us is promised tomorrow. The youngest here, whether you're 3, whether you're 30, whether you're 83, or somewhere in between, none of us has a compass, none of us has a crystal ball. None of us knows what tomorrow really will hold. We can plan, we can organize, and it's not wrong to when we're planning with the Lord. But here's the thing. Our lives, they just quickly disappear. They're just like a vapor. They're just like a breath that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. And so tonight we need a reminder on some basic facts of life. And that's what I want to give you by the help of God as we find them here in these verses. Facts about life. The first fact about life I want you to think about tonight is this. Life's uncertainty. Life's uncertainty. Verses 13 and 14. Go to now, ye that say, today, tomorrow, we'll go into such a city, continue there a year, buy and sell, we'll get gain. Verse 14, whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow. The little phrase, go to now, I suppose it's a bit of an old one. It has the idea of come now, sort of more olden day speak really, and of course the AV's 400 years old, and the thought really is here is come now, or attention, pay attention to this. That's really the thought there in the original text. Go to now, come now, I want you to think about this, I want you to pay attention to this. This is what James is saying to his readers here. Ye that say. There were certain individuals, and really, when you think about it, they had this kind of a mindset that they were absolutely invincible. They were mapping out their whole, well, certainly the next year anyway. And yet, life was so uncertain. Life is so uncertain, and yet it seems that this doesn't dawn into the mindset of those that James is writing to. You see, in spite of life's uncertainty, I want you to see here that they had a plan, verse 13. Go to now, ye that say today or tomorrow. Here were individuals who had a plan. Tomorrow, I'm going to. Today, I am going to. And the thought here really is this that James is getting at, when you kind of delve a little bit deeper into it, is the fact that the thought of their plans being altered, being changed by the providence of God, it didn't even enter into their mindset or their psyche. They were making plans and they had it set in stone, set in concrete. And they weren't even budgeting for it changing under the providence of God. Their plan, their place. Today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a city. You know, in the Greek it's a little bit more emphatic. It's this city. This city. And so you see this plan here, well, this plan turns into a place. We're going to go into such and such a city. Here are individuals and they have tomorrow, the next day, whatever it might be, whenever they want to, they're going to go to a particular city. It's not just such and such a city. It's not as if they're just going to start off in this business venture. No, they very much have in their minds this city. This city. Perhaps it was a city that they believed was a lucrative city. Maybe trade routes ran into it, maybe trade routes ran out of it. But their plan became a place. Now their place became a proposal, didn't it? Verse 13. Today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a city and continue there a year. So you begin to see it all developing, don't you? Oh, we have a plan today, tomorrow, someday, very soon, we're going to go to such and such a place, this city, and we're going to be there for a year. They have it all mapped out. The very next year of my life is going to look something like this. And of course, a proposal becomes a program, doesn't it? And continue there a year and buy and sell, and just listen to it, how arrogant they are, and get gain. Make profit. Turn a profit. They are absolutely convinced, these Jews, these Christian Jews that James is writing to, that's the context, that they're going to go to a particular place, a particular city. They're going to be there for exactly a year. They're going to buy and sell, and they're going to turn a profit. Wow. And yet all the while, this is where then we come into life's uncertainty, because James then, after dealing with this kind of a mindset in verse 13, this then drives home verse 14, doesn't it? Whereas you know not what shall be in the morrow. You see what James is saying here? Oh, you individuals, you have it planned out for the next year. And more than that, you're just assuming that things are going to go well under the providence of God, that you're going to turn a profit. They haven't even budgeted for the fact that they may be in the minus, that things may not go as well as they planned. But he goes on to say that life is so uncertain because you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. Life's uncertainty. And I wonder, do these businessmen just mirror your mindset this evening? Here you are and you have it all figured out, don't you? Oh, it's not wrong to plan, it's not wrong to forecast, don't get me wrong. But remember that in all of your forecasting about tomorrow, remember that you need to put Jesus Christ in the middle of all of your plans. And you need to make these plans with the reality in your life, the reality in your mind that I am not promised tomorrow. Yes, we do need to plan and we do need to forecast, but we need to do it in a godly manner. Recognizing that yes, whilst it's good to look into the distance, good to be organized, don't get me wrong, but at the same time that you do it with that mindset that life is so uncertain, because nobody is promised tomorrow. Someone has said this, that there's only one great certainty about life. It's uncertainty. It's uncertainty. And that's one thing you can be certain of, that life is so uncertain. A phone call can at times change everything. Think about a loved one, and there they are, and all is well, and all of a sudden, just into eternity. A phone call can change someone's life forever. You've got X news. You've been given weeks, months to live. Life is so uncertain. And that is why it shows you tonight that in the midst, and bearing in mind the uncertainty of life, you need to use Amos 4 verse 12 tells us, you need to prepare to meet thy God. As God speaks to you today, harden not your heart towards him. Proverbs 27 verse 1 tells us we're not to boast ourselves of tomorrow because we don't know what a day will bring forth. We're not to boast of tomorrow because really we don't know what tomorrow will hold. And maybe this is you tonight, and I say especially to the young here. It's good to have plans. It is good. You can't just amble through life without a plan, because you'll just amble through life and do absolutely nothing with your life. And many do live like that, unfortunately. It's not wrong to have a plan, but ensure that with all of your planning, that you have Christ in the middle of that plan, and you remember that at the end of the day, that it needs to be well with my soul, because I am not promised tomorrow. You remember the foolish farmer, don't you? Luke chapter 12, there he was, great crop. He is forecasting great crop upon great crop. And so what does he want? He wants bigger barns built. And yet God comes to him in Luke 12 verse 20, and he says, thou fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Thinking about tomorrow, thinking about next year, and yet he forgot this reality that life was uncertain and his life was required of him tonight. And some of you are maybe counting on tomorrow. Tomorrow will come to Christ. I'll come to Christ when I'm 9. I'll come to Christ when I'm 12. I'll come to Christ when I'm 50. I'll come to Christ when I'm 60. And you're not promised tomorrow. Raphael, the great artist, thought that the next day, tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll finish my great work of art. You know what? He never saw tomorrow. And that unfinished painting was draped all over his coffin in his funeral procession. You can think of Schubert, the great musician. One of his greatest works is the Unfinished Symphony. He planned to finish that symphony tomorrow, but tomorrow didn't come. There's a famous writer, Walter Scott, Sir Walter Scott. And this is his last diary entry. Just listen to this. Tomorrow we shall. Tomorrow we shall. And he never saw tomorrow. My friend, life is so uncertain. And that is the great fact that you need to remember, that nobody is promised tomorrow because it's so uncertain. Life's uncertainty. Think with me, secondly, about life's brevity. Life's brevity, verse 14, whereas you know not what shall be in the morrow, for what is your life? It's even a vapour that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. So here were Jews and they were planning a year down the line. And James makes it abundantly clear here in this verse 14, that they didn't even realise that they were not promised tomorrow. Now James is a typical man here. I like this. He asks them a question, for what is your life? And before they answer, he answers for them. Sometimes men do that. They ask you a question, but they don't even give you time to answer. And this is what happens here with James. He asks them a question, for what is your life? But he doesn't give them time to answer. He then goes on to answer it himself, and he says this, it is even a vapour that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. In the Greek, there's a bit of a play on words here, and has the idea of something appearing, and then just as quickly as it appears, it then vanishes, it disappears again. Appears and disappears. That's how you could essentially read it. The word vapour here, it refers to a bit of mist or a bit of hot air. You can think of the kettle. You boil the kettle, the steam comes, the steam rises, and of course as soon as it rises, it's no sooner there than it's gone again. It's there and it's gone. And James, after reminding these individuals about the uncertainty of life, he then tells them, look, life at best is indeed very brief. It's just like steam. You see it 1 minute, it's gone the next. It appears and it disappears. And you know, folks, it doesn't really matter how young you are or how young you even may feel this evening. We all have a short time to live. We all have a little window of opportunity that God has given to you, and it's called time. And this is the reality. Some of you may see 70. Some of you may see 80. I would love to see it all. But the reality is that some of you may not. Some of you may not live to see the allotted time that God has spoken of in Psalm 90. One of the most difficult things I've had to do as a minister is bury a little one. And that was a stark reminder to me of just the brevity of life, that life is so short. And that little one wasn't even one. Whether we're 8 or 80, 32 or 62, life, it is so brief. And even 70 years, I mean, what is it? It's such a short span of time. You know, if you were to even ask old Methuselah, the oldest man in the Bible, over 900 years old, do you know what he would say? He would say this, what is my life? It is a vapour that appears for a little while and then it vanishes away. I believe with all of my heart, when you get to glory and see Methuselah, he will say that to you. It was so short. It was so brief. You think of 1 Chronicles 29 verse 15. We are strangers before thee. We're all fathers. Our days on the earth are as a shadow, and there's none abiding. And the amazing thing about it is this, is that David prayed this shortly before his death in the temple. It was at that moment in his life where he wanted to build the temple, but of course God said to him that you can't build the temple. It's not God's will, it's not my will. And so Solomon then was charged with building the temple. David does what he could. He gets all the materials in line. He does what he can for Solomon. And then he prays this in the temple: my days on earth are just like a shadow. And he passes away soon after that. Goes into glory. Job knew how brief life was, didn't he? He watched all of his family taken from him in an instant. In an instant. And that's why he could say in Job 7 verse 6, my days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. And the old weaver's shuttle, it's just the idea of it going forwards and backwards, forwards and backwards, forwards and backwards. It's there 1 minute, it's gone the next. He said, my days are so brief. And there was someone who not merely could say it, but has felt it. As he buried, I'm sure, with great grief, his children. Of course, God was good to him in the end. But his days were swifter than a weaver's beam. What is the Bible's view on life? It's this: it's here today and gone tomorrow. And we all need to realize this evening. That you're here today and you're here for a little while. And life, my friend, is so brief. It goes like a flash. I'm ordained 6 years, and I can remember, saying this to Leah this week, I can remember the day that we were ordained up in Londonderry, and it was just like that. Just like that. 6 years this week. It's so swift, it's so brief. Someone has described life like this with a little rhyme: when I was a child, I laughed and wept, time crept. When I was a youth, I dreamed and talked, time walked. When I became a man, then time ran. Soon I shall be passing on, time gone. And that is so true. When you're young, time just seems to creep on, doesn't it? And then you get a little bit older and time seems to speed up a little bit. And then you get a little bit older again. And then it goes so quickly. 1 Corinthians 9:27 says this: time is short. And in the Greek, there's the picture of the clock being wound up. And that's a lovely and a very, very solemn way as well to describe our life. Our lives are so short, it's just like the old clock being wound up. I trust that you remember this evening. Life's uncertainty, life's brevity. I want you then to see lastly here and quickly, life's responsibility. You see, in light of this, James then highlights a responsibility upon these individuals. Verse 15, for that you ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. And then verse 17, therefore to him that knows to do good and doeth it not, to him it's sin. In light of how uncertain and how brief life was, James exhorts these self-conceited, these smug individuals that they had a responsibility to make the best use of their time and lives. And he was saying essentially in verse 15, yes, as long as you submit your plans to the will of God, Deo volante, this is where it essentially comes from here. As long as you submit your life to the will of God and you submit your plans to the will of God, then that's okay. But then verse 17, to you that knows to do good and does it not, to him it's sin. Now you think about who he's speaking to here. He's speaking to individuals who hope to turn a profit. He's speaking to individuals who hope that things will go well for them. And with privilege comes responsibility. And you see what he's saying here? He's saying this: don't live for all of the stuff of life. Don't live for these things, because when you have opportunity to do good with what God has given you, and you do it not, to you it's sin. You know what it is to have the blessing of heaven upon you, and yet when you spurn that blessing and you don't do it, you don't obey God. When you know to do good and you don't do it, it's sin. And so he's summing this up here then. It is essentially saying this: don't get caught up in life and work to the point where you leave God out of the equation. Bring him into the center of it and ensure that whenever you have an opportunity to do the right thing, that you do it. There's a responsibility that comes with life. And because life is uncertain and time is short, God is saying to you this evening, simply do good. Do good. If there's an opportunity for you to do good, then do it. And you who are not a Christian this evening, what is the greatest good that you could do? It is to turn from sin. It is to beckon the Spirit of God into your heart and life and ask Him to make you anew. Because you know what that'll do? That'll give you the right motive to do good. Because people do good and they're not Christians, let's face it. But they always do good for the wrong reason, or the wrong motive, sorry. It is either to appease their own conscience, or else to be viewed by others, and inside of others. But whenever you have a new heart, and God gives to you a new heart, you know what you'll find? You will find that you will have a desire to do good, but for the right reason. Not to please man, but first and foremost to please God, to please Jesus Christ. As the book of Romans, I think, tells us, no man lives to himself, neither no man dies to himself. Whether we live or whether we die, we're the Lord's. And so you need to live unto God this evening. It doesn't really matter with what man sees you do. If you have an opportunity to do good, and of course you all have an opportunity tonight to do good, especially those of you who are not Christians, is to place your hands into the very hand, or life in the very hand of God, and say, Lord, make me do good, but make me do good for the right reason. Prepare for eternity. Let the Lord have His way in your life every day. And my friend, I say this, if you don't do it, it's a sin. It is. Let me repeat that. If you don't do it, it's a sin. That's harsh. Revelation chapter 21, you have a long list of those who are in hell. You have the adulterers, you have the whoremongers, you have a huge catalogue of the worst kind of individuals that are in hell. Do you know how that list starts? You go and check it for yourself. The fearful and the unbelieving. Those who don't believe. In other words, those who do not believe, those who have an opportunity to do good but do it not, to them it's sin. When you have an opportunity to believe in Jesus Christ but you don't, it's a sin. It's a sin. You have an opportunity presented to you tonight. Christians, you have opportunity to do good, to hand out the goodness of God, to speak to people about the goodness of God in Jesus Christ. Make sure that whenever you have an opportunity to do good, that you do it. Because life is so short. Our days are like a shadow that declines. They quickly hasten on. Henry Ward Beecher said this, and with I'm finished. Imagine a man building a house and deciding to build it apart from the plans of the architect. And so what is he doing? He's just building this house, and he's got the plans all there, but he decides to do his own thing with his life. And then the architect comes, he performs his checks. What's the result? The result is absolute chaos. And so it is, not merely building, but building a life. God is the architect. Man would be an absolute fool if he decided to build it any other way than the way in which God has intended. What are you building your life on this evening? I ask you what James asks. What is your life? Money, pleasure, possessions. What is your life? It's just a vapor. It appears for a little time and then it just quickly vanishes away. Facts about life. May God bless His word to your lives this evening. We'll just close our time.